July 12, 1943. The vast, sun-baked plains near Prokhorovka, in the heart of the Soviet Union. Dust devils swirled across the endless sea of golden wheat, kicked up by the growl of diesel engines that shook the earth like distant thunder. You could feel it in your chest, the vibration of tracks grinding over rocky soil, the acrid tang of exhaust mingling with the metallic bite of gun oil. In the command, Panther Aussifs D, Oberstleutnant Hans von der Leyen gripped the edge of his map table, his gloved fingers tracing the hasty lines of the latest orders from Army Group South. The radio crackled intermittently, spitting out fragments of chatter from the front lines. Panzergrenadier Regiment 24, reporting heavy artillery. Soviet T-34s massing 2 kilometers east. Von der Leyen was a veteran of the Eastern Front, his face etched with the scars of Smolensk and Kharkov. At 42, he commanded the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, a spearhead of steel and fury in Operation Citadel, the great offensive to pinch off the Kursk salient and shatter the Red Army once and for all. His crew huddled in the dim confines of the tank, sweat beading on their brows despite the open hatch. The loader, a wiry boy from Bavaria named Klaus, wiped his forehead with a rag stained black from grease. "Herr Oberstleutnant," he muttered, "those Ivans are dug in like ticks. If we push now, it'll be a slaughter." Outside, the divisions might assembled in ragged echelons, tigers looming like prehistoric beasts, their 18mm KWK-36 guns swiveling toward the horizon. Panzer IVs with long-barreled 75mm cannons barking test fires that echoed like whips. Luftwaffe Messerschmitt Bf-109s droned overhead, their shadows flickering across the fields. But the sky was contested, Soviet Yak-9s occasionally swooping low, machine guns chattering in futile harassment. Von der Leyen ignored the boy's unease. His eyes fixed on the horizon, where faint plumes of smoke rose from yesterday's clashes. The air hummed with tension, a held breath before the storm. Orders had come down from General Oberst Hans Huber's Ibdemin Corps. Exploit the breach, drive hard into the Soviet defenses, link up with the 48th Panzer Corps to the north. But whispers among the officers spoke of delays, fuel shortages, jammed tracks from the mud, and now this, a new directive from higher up, straight from the Führer's headquarters. The radio hissed again, clearer this time. "Das Reich, this is Citadel Command. Stand by for priority transmission from Model." Field Marshal Walter Model, the defensive genius turned offensive hammer, his voice gravelly even through the static. Von der Leyen leaned closer, the scent of stale cigarettes clinging to his uniform. "All units, adjust axis of advance. Soviet counter-offensive detected at Prokhorovka. Divert 50% of armor to reinforce Hill 252. 2. Hold primary thrust until confirmation of enemy positions. Acknowledge." Von der Leyen's jaw tightened. Hill 252. 2? That was a secondary objective. A dusty rise 10 kilometers off the main push toward the Sel River. The plan had been clear: smash through the Soviet Fifth Guards, tank army's lines in a blitz of fire and maneuver, encircling thousands before they could react. Now this, splitting his forces, diluting the assault just as momentum built. He glanced at his adjutant, Hauptmann Erich Stahl, who was scribbling notes on a grease-smeared pad. "Model's playing it safe again," Stahl whispered, his Prussian accent clipped. "The Soviets are probing, not counter-attacking in force. If we hesitate, we'll lose the window." The Oberstleutnant didn't respond immediately. He stepped out of the Panther, boots crunching on the parched earth, and surveyed his command. To the east, the wheat swayed under a hot wind, carrying the faint ominous rumble of Soviet Katyusha rockets. Stalin's organs, they called them, wailing sirens of death. His division had 150 tanks operational this morning, backed by motorized infantry in Sadid KFZ. 251 half-tracks, their MG-42 machine guns manned and ready. But fuel was rationed, ammunition tight after days of attritional fighting. A wrong move here could bleed them dry. Back inside, von der Leyen keyed the radio. Citadel Command. This is Das Reich Actual. Acknowledge diversion to Hill 252. 2. Request clarification. Enemy strength estimates. The reply came after an agonizing pause, the static like nails on a chalkboard. Negative on estimates. Proceed immediately. Führer directive. No risks to the flank. No risks. Von der Leyen felt a chill despite the heat. Hube had argued for a full frontal assault at the morning briefing, citing reconnaissance from FW-189 Uhu spotter planes showing Soviet tanks, perhaps 500 T-34s and KV-1s, clustered but disorganized. Yet Model, ever the calculator, saw phantoms in every shadow. The Oberstleutnant relayed the order to his battalion commanders. Panzer Group Alpha. Redirect to coordinates 1522. Beta holds and prepares defensive positions. Move out. Engines roared to life, a symphony of mechanical fury. The ground trembled as the Tigers led the column, their broad tracks chewing furrows in the soil. Dust clouds billowed, obscuring vision, and you could taste the grit on your tongue, feel the heat radiating from armored hulls. Klaus, back at his post, chambered around into the 75mm TQK-42, his hands steady but eyes wide. "This feels wrong, Herr Oberst," he said. Von der Leyen clapped a hand on his shoulder. "War is full of wrongs, son. We adapt." As the division lurched forward, veering north toward the hill, scouts reported the first contacts. Soviet BT-7 light tanks darting from the tree line, their 45mm guns flashing. A Panzer IV brewed up in the distance, flames licking the turret as the crew bailed out, screaming amid the crack of small arms fire. Von der Leyen watched from his command tank, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The diversion was pulling them into a sideshow, away from the main Soviet concentrations, where air support from Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers could have turned the tide. Reports trickled in. The 48th Panzer Corps, unsupported D, was bogging down against fresh Soviet reserves. Their advance stalled without the promised link-up. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the interior of the Panther into an oven. Sweat soaked von der Leyen's collar as he pored over the map again. Intelligence from Abwehr agents suggested the real threat was south, not this flank nonsense, a massive armoured clash brewing at Prokhorovka itself, where Rotmistrov's 5th Guards were massing for a counterpunch. If they didn't reverse course, the entire offensive could unravel. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the radio. To defy Model's order was treason. To obey might doom thousands. The first Soviet barrage hit then, 152mm howitzers from hidden batteries thundering like gods in anger. Shells whistled overhead, one slamming into a neighboring Tiger, erupting in a fireball that lit the wheat afire. Shrapnel pinged off the Panther's sloped armor, and Klaus yelled, "Incoming!" Von der Leyen made his call, voice steady amid the chaos. "All units maintain advance, but prepare for fallback." If you want to dive deeper into these forgotten turning points of the war, subscribe to the channel for more. The decision hung in the air like smoke, but as the T-34s crested the ridge, guns blazing, von der Leyen realized the true cost was just beginning to unfold. The flank that swallowed a division, the T-34s burst from the ridge like wolves from the underbrush, their sloped hulls glinting under the relentless July sun. Dust erupted in choking clouds as their 76mm F-34 guns roared, shells slamming into the German advance with vicious precision. You could hear the whine of incoming rounds cutting the air, feel the ground shudder with each impact. Von der Leyen's Panther lurched forward, its Maybach HL-230 engine snarling as the driver gunned it to evade a near miss that gouged a crater mere meters away. "Traverse left! Fire!" the Oberstleutnant barked, his voice cutting through the din inside the tank. The gunner, Unteroffizier Fritz Bauer swung the turret with practiced fury, the 75mm KBUDK-42 barking in response. A high explosive round streaked out, striking a lead T-34 square on the turret ring. The Soviet tank shuddered, flames belching from the hatches as the crew scrambled to escape, only to be cut down by the coaxial MG-34's chatter. But for every kill, two more Reds appeared, their diesel engines growling like a pack closing in. Klaus, the loader, slammed another shell home, his face smeared with sweat and cordite, breath coming in ragged gasps. "They're everywhere, Herr Oberst, flanking us from the north." Von der Leyen peered through the commander's episcope, the world reduced to a narrow slit of chaos. The diversion to Hill 252. Two had funneled his Panzer Group Alpha into a kill zone, a shallow valley ringed by low rises where Soviet anti-tank guns, 76mm ZIS-3s, lay concealed in the wheat. Recon had missed them entirely. Or perhaps the Abwehr's spies in the rear had fed bad intel amid the fog of war. To the south, the main thrust toward Prokhorovka faltered without support. Radio traffic from the 48th Panzer Corps painted a grim picture. Hermann Balck's panzers bogged in minefields, unsupported by the promised Das Reich armor. Stahl, Signal Beta Group, tighten the perimeter. "I call for Stukas if you can raise them," von der Leyen ordered, his mind racing. The hill itself loomed ahead, a barren knob crowned by scrub and the twisted wreckage of a downed Il-2 Sturmovik from yesterday's air skirmish. The battle unfolded in brutal snapshots. A Tiger Y, commanded by the grizzled SS Obersturmführer Karl Richter, anchored the right flank, its 18-meter gun thundering like Judgment Day. Richter's beast claimed 3 T-34s in quick succession, the impacts crumpling armor like tin, sending plumes of black smoke skyward. But the Soviets adapted fast. Infantry in olive drab swarmed from foxholes, lobbing Molotov cocktails that ignited a Panzervorfe's fuel tanks in a whoosh of fire. Screams echoed as the crew tumbled out, only to meet PPSH-41 submachine guns spitting lead from the tree line. The air thickened with the stench of burning rubber and flesh, the metallic tang of blood mixing with the ever-present dust. Halfway up the slope to Hill 252. Von der Leyen's column stalled. A KV-1 heavy tank, its massive 76mm gun protruding like a battering ram, blocked the path, shrugging off hits from flanking Panzer IVs. The Soviet monster's armor, thick as a bank vault, turned away 75mm rounds with sparks and groans. "Concentrate fire!" von der Leyen radioed, directing his Tigers to converge. The lead Tiger fired first, the shell glancing off the KV's turret. Then another. And another. Finally, a lucky penetrator from Richter's gun found the tracks, immobilizing the beast. Grenadiers from the 4th SS Panzergrenadier Regiment dismounted their half-tracks, Sturmgewehr 44s chattering as they closed in. But the KV's machine guns swept them down like wheat before a scythe. By early afternoon, the push had cost dearly. Von der Leyen tallied the losses in his head. 12 tanks knocked out, including 2 Panthers from his own battalion, their crews either dead or captured. Wounded men limped back to the aid stations in Stishet KFZ, 10 half-tracks, moans carried on the hot wind. The radio crackled with desperate pleas. Hauptmann Stahl relayed from Corps HQ. "Model demands we secure the hill at all costs. No retreat. Luftwaffe en route ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes in this meat grinder felt like eternity. Von der Leyen wiped sweat from his brow, the leather of his gloves sticking to his skin. He thought of the broader canvas. Operation Citadel was bleeding out. Initial gains had excited the High Command, Erich von Manstein's southern pincer clawing toward the Oboyan Road, but delays mounted. Hitler's meddling from Rastenburg, shifting reserves to Italy after the Allied landings in Sicily, starved the front of fuel and replacements. And now this flank fixation, born of Model's paranoia over a phantom Soviet counteroffensive. You could sense the fracture in the ranks. In the loader's hatch, Klaus muttered prayers under his breath, crossing himself despite the SS runes on his collar. "Those Katyushas are coming, I can feel it," he said, eyes darting to the horizon where faint rocket trails streaked the sky. Sure enough, the Stalin's organs wailed, a banshee chorus that turned the valley into hell. Salvos of 132mm M13 rockets rained down, blanketing the German positions in fire and shrapnel. A half-track exploded nearby, its 20mm Flak 38 guns silenced forever, the driver vaporized in the blast. Von der Leyen's Panther rocked from a near hit, the turret crew thrown against their stations. "Keep moving, up the hill," he roared, but doubt gnawed at him. Scouts from motorcycle dispatch riders reported the real storm brewing at Prokhorovka. Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army, over 800 tanks strong, massing for a hammer blow against the exposed German salient. If Das Reich didn't disengage and pivot south, the entire 18th Corps risked encirclement. As the Tigers crested Hill 252-2, the view unfolded like a nightmare. Below, the valley swarmed with Soviet armor, Su-85 tank destroyers prowling the flanks, T-70 lights darting for weak spots. Von der Leyen ordered a defensive arc, the panzers hull down behind the rise, guns trained on the approach. Richter's voice cut through the net. "Herr Oberstleutnant, we've taken the objective, but at what price? My company's down to half strength. Permission to fall back?" The request hung heavy. Defying model meant court-martial. Perhaps the firing squad at Heeresgruppe Süd's HQ, but holding here was suicide. Ammunition dwindled, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that hid enemy movements. A fresh wave hit then, Soviet infantry charging with fixed bayonets, supported by BT-7s that zipped through the smoke. Machine guns rattled, MG-42s, barking their signature tear-the-air buzz, mowing down dozens. Yet the Reds pressed, human waves fueled by commissar threats and raw desperation. Von der Leyen fired his pistol from the hatch, dropping a sergeant mid-stride, but it was futile theatre. In the command tank, Stahl thrust a flimsy at him, a decoded intercept from Enigma traffic, courtesy of the signals unit. "Soviet orders, sir. They're coordinating with the Voronezh front for a full counterattack at dawn. Prokhorovka's the anvil. We're the hammer they're swinging at ourselves." The Oberstleutnant's resolve cracked. He keyed the radio, voice low and urgent. "All units prepare to withdraw south. Citadel Command, this is Das Reich actual. Flank secured, but enemy forces overwhelming. Request immediate permission to rejoin main axis." Static answered first, then models clipped tone. "Negative. Hold position. Führer orders. No withdrawal. Reinforcements inbound." "Inbound from where? The depleted reserves of the 9th Army?" Von der Leyen slammed the handset down, the gesture swallowed by another rocket barrage that lit the hill in infernal red. As dusk bled into the sky, the first Ju-87 Stukas screamed in, bombs whistling down on Soviet clusters. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers, buying precious minutes. But the cost mounted, thousands of Reich soldiers pinned, bleeding out on foreign soil for a hill that meant nothing. Von der Leyen watched a tiger brew up, Richter's voice silenced mid-report. The fatal error echoed in every shell burst. The command from on high, blind to the ground truth, dooming them to this grind. And as night fell, with T-34 engines growling closer, the true unraveling whispered on the wind. Night of reckoning on Hill 252. Darkness cloaked the hill like a shroud, broken only by the fitful glow of flares arcing overhead and the muzzle flashes that stitched the night with fire. The air hung heavy with the reek of cordite, diesel fumes, and the sickly sweet odor of charred metal, remnants of the day's carnage. Von der Leyen's Panther sat hull down behind a jagged outcrop, its engine idling low to conserve fuel, the crew tense in the stifling confines. You could hear it all. The distant rumble of T-34 tracks grinding over the valley floor, the sporadic crack of sniper rifles picking off sentries, the labored breathing of wounded men huddled in the lee of wrecked vehicles. Klaus, the loader, clutched his MP-40 submachine gun, peering into the blackness through the hatch. "They're out there, Herr Oberstleutnant, waiting for us to blink." Von der Leyen nodded grimly, his field glasses sweeping the tree line below where Soviet shadows shifted like ghosts. The denial from Model still burned in his gut. A Führer order, unyielding as iron, chaining them to this worthless rise while Prokhorovka boiled over 10 kilometers south. Radio intercepts painted a dire picture. The 48th Panzer Corps, isolated and hammered, had lost 30 tanks to Rotmistrov's onslaught, their lines buckling under waves of T-34-85s and IS-2 heavies fresh from the factories. Das Reich's absence was a gaping wound. Without their punch, Hube's IPT Corps teetered on collapse. The Oberstleutnant had argued into the radio until his voice grew hoarse, but the reply was always the same. "Hold. Reinforcements from the 3rd Panzer Division rerouted. Dawn extraction possible." Dawn. It felt like a cruel joke. Ammunition crates lay half-empty beside the panzers. 75 mm rounds rationed to 3 per gun, machine gun belts frayed from endless bursts. The infantry, remnants of the 2nd SS Panzergrenadier Regiment, dug shallow scrapes in the rocky soil, their shovels clinking against stones. SS Untersturmführer Otto Lange, a platoon leader with a bandaged arm from the afternoon's KV-1 duel, crawled up to the command tank. "Herr Oberstleutnant, we've got maybe 200 effectives left on the hill. The wounded are piling up. Need more morphine from the field kitchen." His eyes, hollowed by exhaustion, flicked to the valley. "And those bastards are probing. Lost 3 men to a raid already." Von der Leyen stepped out into the chill night air, the wind whispering through the wheat like accusatory fingers. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the slaughter below, but the horizon to the east pulsed with the orange glow of Prokhorovka's inferno, artillery duels and tank clashes that shook the ground even here. He could picture it. Manstein's southern forces grinding forward on the Oboyan axis, only to stall as reserves evaporated. Hitler's fatal error, the diversion, stemmed from a garbled Enigma decrypt. Soviet deception ops feeding model visions of a massive flank attack that never materialized. Instead, the real hammer fell elsewhere, and Das Reich paid the butcher's bill. A flare popped suddenly, bathing the slope in harsh white light. Shapes materialized. Soviet scouts, penal battalion conscripts in ragged tunics, slinking forward with PPSH drums rattling softly. "Contact!" Lang shouted, and the hill erupted. MG-42s chattered from sandbagged nests, their 1-200 rounds per minute buzz tearing into the attackers. Bodies tumbled, screams cut short. But more followed. Cannon fire from hidden Su-76 barked 76-mitten shells, whistling past to crater the earth. Von der Leyen's pistol cracked twice, dropping a figure mid-charge, but the raid pulled back, leaving booby-trapped corpses as grim souvenirs. Back in the Panther, Stahl hunched over the radio, static hissing like serpents. "Corps reports incoming Soviet armor. 5th Guards pushing probes toward our position. Luftwaffe sortie cancelled. Weather front moving in." Weather? Clouds gathered now, blotting the stars, promising rain that would turn the tracks to mud. Von der Leyen clenched his fists. The command error's ripples spread. By splitting the division, they'd ceded initiative, allowing Rotmistrov to mass unmolested. Scouts on BMW R-75 motorcycles had evaded patrols earlier, reporting over 600 Soviet tanks now encircling the main German thrust, KV-85s and T-34s in echelons, backed by Il-2s that would strafe at first light. The night wore on in fits of violence. Around 0200 hours, a full assault crashed against the perimeter. T-34s, engines muffled but unmistakable, crested the valley lip, their lights doused to silhouettes against the faint moonlight. "Armor approaching, bearing 270. Bauer yelled from the gunner's seat, traversing the turret with a hydraulic whine. The Panther's KWK-42 spoke first, an armor-piercing round punching through a lead tank's glacis at 800 meters. The T-34 erupted in a gout of flame, turret blown skyward by the ammo cook-off, illuminating the charge like a stage. But the Soviets swarmed, 20-30 strong, their 76mm guns flashing in riposte. Chaos reigned. Tigers on the left flank, including the slot where Richters had fallen, returned fire with their 88mm, shattering 2 T-34s into scrap. Yet numbers told, a Panzer IV took a hull hit, its OS for H model breaching catastrophically, crew incinerated in seconds. Grenadiers poured flanking fire from half-tracks, their 20mm KWK-38 autocannons shredding infantry supports. But Molotovs arced through the dark, igniting fuel drums that turned positions into pyres. Von der Leyen directed from the cupola, shouting adjustments as shrapnel pinged off the armor. "Klaus, high explosive, target the tracks!" The loader complied, sweat flying. But a glancing blow rocked the tank, stunning Bauer and filling the interior with acrid smoke from a damaged optic. By 0300 the assault broke, Soviet wrecks smouldering amid the German dead, over 50 SS men lost in the melee, their black uniforms stark against the soil. Von der Leyen tallied via flashlight, division strength slashed to 80 operational tanks, infantry at half. The hill a fortress of the damned. Wounded groaned in the aid post, a canvas tent lit by lanterns where medics from the 2nd SS Medical Company worked by feel, amputating limbs with bone saws amid cries. Langer reported back, bloodied but unbowed. "We held, sir, but ammo's critical. If they hit again at full strength." The Oberstleutnant knew it was coming. Dawn crept in grey and sullen. Rain pattering on the hulls like Morse code for doom. Radio traffic surged, Hube's pleas to OKH for relief, models stonewalling under Hitler's directive. No retreat from citadel positions, victory or annihilation. Von der Leyen stared south, where thunder rolled not from clouds, but from the clash at Prokhorovka. The error's toll mounted by the hour, thousands bleeding out across the salient because one command, blind and rigid, diverted the decisive force to shadows. A runner arrived then, gasping from a Kubelwagen dash. "Herr Oberstleutnant, orders from Corps, counterpush south at C600, link with remnants of the 3rd Panzer." Counterpush? With what? Ghosts and prayers. As the 1st Soviet artillery probed the hill, ranging shots from 120 M30 howitzers that cratered the reverse slope, von der Leyen felt the weight of it all. The Reich's gamble at Kursk teetered, and his division, pawns in the fatal misstep, faced the dawn's judgment. But in the gathering light, as T-34 silhouettes massed anew, a spark of defiance flickered. He'd not let Model's folly claim them without a fight. Dawn's desperate breakout. The first light of July 13th pierced the horizon like a bloodied blade, casting long shadows over the battered crest of Hill 252. Rain-slicked mud clung to the tracks of the surviving panzers, turning the ground into a quagmire that sucked at boots and wheels alike. You could taste the damp chill in the air, mingled with the coppery scent of blood from the night's wounds, and hear the low moans of the injured echoing from the makeshift aid station. Von der Leyen's Panther idled at the forward edge, its barrel trained on the valley below, where Soviet T-34s prowled like predators, scenting weakness. Exhaust fumes curled lazily from the exhausts. The Maybach engines rumble, a counterpoint to the distant thunder of Prokhorovka's ongoing maelstrom. Cannon fire and explosions that rolled across the plains like an unending storm. Inside the tank, the crew moved with weary precision. Klaus rammed a final armor-piercing round into the breach, his hands trembling not from cold, but from the knowledge that each shot might be their last. "Herr Oberstleutnant," he said, voice barely above the engine's growl, "that counter-push order. It's madness. We're down to scraps." Von der Leyen didn't reply at first, his eyes fixed on the radio where Hauptmann Stahl monitored the net. The new directive from Hubes Engstkorps had come at 0500, terse and urgent. Das Reich, initiate breakout south at 0600. Rejoin 48th Panzer Corps at coordinates 18 to 15. Luftwaffe cover promised, no delays. Promised. The word tasted like ash. Overnight losses had gutted the division. Tank strength hovered at 65 operational, including just 8 Tigers, their 80-day teammate KWK-36s, the only real punch left. Infantry from the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment mustered barely 150 rifles, many bandaged and hollow-eyed. Von der Leyen stepped onto the turret, the chill wind whipping his greatcoat as he surveyed the formation. The panzers formed a ragged wedge. Tigers in the van, Panthers and Panzerbefehl OSF, Gs flanking, supported by a handful of SIN KFZ 251 half-tracks, towing 75mm Paquet 40 anti-tank guns. To the rear, the walking wounded and ammo details huddled in Kubelwagens, their faces masks of grim resolve. SS Untersturmführer Otto Lange, his arm in a sling, saluted stiffly. "My platoon will screen the left, sir. We've got PPSH captures from the raiders. Might even the odds." Von der Leyen nodded, clapping the young officer's shoulder. "Hold the flank, Lange. Get your men through, that's the order." But in his mind, the calculus screamed failure. Model's flank obsession had bled them white for nothing, a feint that left the main axis exposed. Now this desperate lunge south, through Soviet lines thickened by the delay, to plug a hole that might already be fatal. At 0600 sharp, the engines roared to life, a mechanical chorus that shattered the dawn's fragile quiet. The column lurched forward down the hill's eastern slope, tracks churning mud into fountains. The lead Tiger, commanded by SS Hauptsturmführer Wilhelm Becker, belching smoke from a jury-rigged repair. Von der Leyen rode in the 2nd Panther, binoculars pressed to his eyes as scouts on Zundap KS-750 motorcycles darted ahead, their sidecars mounting MG-34s, the valley floor unfolded in deceptive calm, wheat fields pocked with craters, the hulks of last night's T-34 wrecks still smouldering, but tension coiled like a spring. You could feel it in the way the air hummed, the faint whine of Soviet spotter planes, Po-2 biplanes, plywood pests buzzing low to mark targets. Contact came swift and savage. 5 kilometers into the push, a Soviet ambush erupted from a tree line. Su-85 tank destroyers, their 85mm D5T guns flashing like lightning. The first shell struck Becker's Tiger on the mantlet, ricocheting with a screech but stunning the crew. "Fire! Traverse right!" Von der Leyen bellowed over the radio, his own gunner Fritz Bauer snapping the KWK-42 onto a lead Su-85 at 600 meters. The round punched through the destroyer's thinly armored casemate, erupting it in a fireball that lit the woods. Cheers crackled over the net, but elation died quick. More Su-85s and T-34-76 materialized from hull-down positions, their diesel engines snarling as they traded shots. The breakout devolved into a rolling firefight, panzers weaving through shell craters while half-tracks sprayed, suppressing fire. A Panzer IV on the right took a direct hit from a ZS-3 76mm gun hidden in the brush, the Ausservice H variant's long 75mm KWK-40 useless in its final moment as ammunition detonated, hurling the turret skyward. Crewmen bailed into the mud, only to be cut down by Soviet machine guns, DP-28s chattering from foxholes. Lange's grenadiers dismounted, Sturmgewehr 44s barking in short bursts, but the press was relentless. "Flanking infantry! Molotovs incoming!" Stahl yelled inside the Panther, ducking as a bottle shattered against the rear deck, flames licking harmlessly off the armor but igniting a nearby fuel can. Von der Leyen directed the chaos, his voice a steady anchor amid the bedlam. "Becker, punch through the center. Call for air if you can." But the Luftwaffe's promise rang hollow. No Bf-109s or Fw-190s pierced the overcast. grounded by the rain that now fell in sheets, turning the advance into a slog. Soviet artillery joined the fray, 152mm ML-20 howitzers thundering from afar, their shells walking a barrage that cratered the path ahead. One landed amid a half-track column, the 20mm flak Vierling shredded as the vehicle flipped. SS men scattered like broken dolls. Losses mounted. 3 Panthers brewed up in quick succession, their sloped hulls no match for point-blank 85mm fire. A Tiger lost a track to a mine, stranding it as T-34s circled for the kill. By 800, the column had covered barely 3 kilometers south, the horizon still mocking with Prokhorovka's smoke plumes. Radio traffic from the 48th Panzer Corps painted apocalypse. Balk's forces down to 40% strength, encircled by Rotmistrov's 5th Guards, over 500 tanks hammering the salient, eyes-heavy tanks shrugging off 88mm rounds, while Su-152s pulverized bunkers. Das Reich's tardy arrival might staunch the bleed, but von der Leyen knew the math. Thousands already lost across the front because of the diversion. The Reich's offensive momentum shattered on the anvil of one man's caution. Model, ensconced in his command post, blind to the ground's truths, had cost them dearly. Fuel expended, crews exhausted, the psychological toll etching deeper scars than shrapnel. A fresh crisis hit as they crested a low rise. Soviet reserves, elements of the 1st Tank Corps, barreled in from the east, 50 T-34s strong, their commanders emboldened by the isolated German probe. "All units form lager! Defensive circle!" von der Leyen ordered, the panzers slewing into a hasty perimeter, hulls facing outward. The Tigers anchored the arc, their guns thundering. Beckers claimed 2 T-34s, shells coring engines with precision. But the Soviets enveloped, infantry swarming with anti-tank rifles. PTRD-41s cracking against vision ports, blinding gunners. Klaus fired the coaxial MG-34 until the barrel glowed, bodies piling before the Panther, but a T-34 rammed a flanking Panzer IV, crushing its side in a grind of metal. Inside the command tank, smoke from a breached ready rack filled the air, stinging eyes. Bauer coughed, traversing blindly. "Can't see." Herr Oberst, von der Leyen grabbed the override, aiming by instinct and firing, a high-explosive round that scattered an infantry squad. Stahl thrust a map forward. "2 clicks to the Corps line, sir. If we break now." The Oberstleutnant hesitated, the weight of command crushing. Defy and survive, or obey and perish. As another barrage from Katyushas wailed overhead, turning the field into a cauldron, he keyed the radio. Das Reich to Corps, breaking through final positions, casualties heavy, request immediate support. The push resumed, a forlorn charge through fire and mud, but the cost etched itself in every fallen comrade. As the first German lines of the 48th appeared on the ridge, a final Soviet salvo struck, claiming Langer's half-track in a thunderclap. Von der Leyen watched the young officer fall, his defiance snuffed out. The fatal command's shadow loomed larger now, its toll in lives and steel mounting toward catastrophe, with the day's full reckoning yet to dawn. The ragged column of Das Reich's survivors clawed southward through the downpour, rain hammering the armored hulls like vengeful fists, turning the black earth into a sucking morass that threatened to swallow tracks whole. By 0900 on July 13th, the air thrummed with the ceaseless growl of engines strained to their limits, punctuated by the sharp cracks of small arms fire and the deeper coughs of tank guns finding their marks. You could feel the desperation in every jolt, the way the Panther's suspension groaned under von der Leyen's weight as he braced against the commander's seat, his gloved hands white-knuckled on the radio handset. Water streamed down the vision slits, blurring the world outside into a haze of grey and green, but the Soviet presence was unmistakable. The distant wail of Katyusha rockets fading into echoes, replaced by the closer snarl of pursuing T-34s, their 76mm F-34s probing for stragglers. Inside the tank, the crew fought a battle of their own, against fatigue and fear. Fritz Bauer, the gunner, wiped condensation from his optics with a filthy rag, his eyes bloodshot from the night smoke. "They're gaining, Herr Oberstleutnant. 2 clicks back, at least a dozen," he reported, voice hoarse. Klaus, reloading with mechanical rhythm, paused to spit blood-tinged phlegm from a shrapnel nick on his lip. "We link up, or we don't. Either way, this mud's our grave." Von der Leyen ignored the pessimism, his mind a whirlwind of fragments. Model's ironclad orders, Hitler's distant fiat from the Wolf's Lair, the phantom flank threat that had siphoned his division's strength into this abyss. The 48th Panzer Corps' lines lay just beyond the next rise. Per the last frantic transmission, a thin blue line of Panzer Fours and Grenadiers holding against Rotmistrov's tide. If they reached it, perhaps the wound could be stanched. If not, the entire southern pincer of Citadel crumbled. The breakout's fury peaked as they crested the low ridge at coordinates 1815. Soviet elements from the 1st Tank Corps, sensing blood, surged in a final envelopment. 30 T-34-76 and Su-85s barreling through the rain-lashed fields, their sloped hulls shedding mud like second skins. Lead elements of the German column met them head-on. SS Hauptsturmführer Wilhelm Becker's Tiger unroared defiance, its 88mm KWK-36 thundering a penetrator that cored a T-34 at 700 meters, the Soviet tank erupting in a spray of flames that briefly illuminated the chaos. "Pour it on," von der Leyen radioed, his Panther slewing left to support, the KWK-42 barking high explosive into an Su-85's tracks, immobilizing the destroyer amid a shower of sparks. Half-tracks from the 4th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment flanked the push, their 20mm KWK-38 autocannons stitching the air, shredding Soviet infantry who emerged from the wheat with PTRS-41 anti-tank rifles, barking futilely against Tiger armor. But the odds ground like millstones. A flanking T-34 rammed a trailing Panzer IV OSF-G, the impact crumpling the lighter tank's side in a screech of tortured steel, its crew spilling out into the mud, only to be mowed down by DP-28 light machine guns from accompanying Soviet trucks. Becker's Tiger claimed another kill, the shell glancing off a turret before punching through the rear, ammunition cooking off in a chain of secondary blasts that lit the downpour like hellfire. Yet retribution came swift. An 85mm round from a hidden Su-85 struck Becker's beast on the running gear, shearing a track and stranding it in the open. "Becker, withdraw!" von der Leyen shouted over the net, but static answered, followed by the crackle of flames. The Hauptsturmführer's voice cut through one last time. "For the Reich. Tell my wife." A Soviet shell silenced him forever. The Tiger's massive hull blooming orange as the crew perished inside. Von der Leyen's heart twisted, but he pressed on, directing the remnants, now down to 52 tanks, a skeleton of the division's former glory. Infantry dismounted in the lee of the panzers, SS men in sodden black tunics advancing with bayonets fixed on Kar-98K rifles, their faces gaunt masks of resolve, forged in Smolensk's winters and Kharkov's streets. Otto Lange was gone, his half-track a smouldering crater back on the slope, but his platoon fought on under a sergeant, capturing a wounded Soviet tanker who babbled of Rotmistrov's hammer blow. Over 800 tanks unleashed at Prokhorovka, the clash already claiming 200 German vehicles in the first hours. The command error's shadow loomed in every report. Model's diversion had delayed Das Reich by a critical day, allowing the 5th Guards to consolidate their KV-1s and IS prototypes, turning the fields into graveyards of steel. Finally, at 09:30, the 48th Panzer Corps' outposts materialized through the sheets of rain, a line of dug-in Panzer IVs from Hermann Balck's command, their 75mm KWK-40s swiveling to cover the approach, MG-42 nests chattering suppression fire. Das Reich actual to 48th, requesting link-up, von der Leyen transmitted, relief flooding his voice like cool water. The reply came from Balk himself, gravelly and spent. You're late, Lion. We've held, but at ruinous cost. Form on our left, Rotmistrov still pushing. The columns merged in a ragged embrace, half-tracks exchanging wounded, tigers integrating into the defensive arc. But victory tasted of bile. Von der Leyen dismounted amid the downpour, boots sinking into the mire as he clasped Balk's hand. A fellow veteran, his uniform caked in mud and blood. Model's flank order. It gutted us, von der Leyen said flatly. Balk nodded, eyes distant. Führer's ghost chased shadows. Prokhorovka's lost, thousands gone because we chased them. As the combined forces braced for the next wave, the broader toll unfolded in stark relief. Operation Citadel, the Reich's last great offensive, teetered on the brink. Initial penetrations, Manstein's drive to Aboyan, Model's northern claw, had excited Rastenburg, but the diversion bled the momentum dry. Luftwaffe sorties dwindled to trickles, Ju-87 Stukas, grounded by fuel shortages and Allied pressure in Sicily. Soviet factories churned out T-34s like an endless tide, while German panzers, masterpieces of engineering like the Panther AUSF, D with its interleaved wheels and sloped armor, rusted in the mud from mechanical woes. Von der Leyen tallied his division's ledger in the command tent. 98 tanks destroyed or abandoned since the order, over 500 SS dead or captured in that single day's grind, thousands more across Etikor, the fatal command's ripple effect amplifying the bleed. By midday, as T-34s probed the new line, von der Leyen stood atop his Panther, rain streaming down his face like tears. The error wasn't just tactical, it was human frailty writ large, Model's caution, Hitler's interference, the fog of war swallowing truth. Scouts reported the salient contracting, Hube ordering a phased withdrawal to straighten the front. Citadel died not in a blaze, but in this attrition, the Reich's armored fist blunted, paving the way for Soviet counteroffensives that would reclaim Kharkov by August. Klaus, bandaged but alive, handed von der Leyen a canteen. We made it through, Herr Oberst, but for what? The Oberstleutnant stared east, where Prokhorovka's smoke still rose, a pyre for ambitions shattered. The war ground on, but on this blood-soaked plain, one day's misstep echoed into eternity, costing the Reich not just thousands, but the illusion of invincibility.